On December 30th, 2006, the United States oversaw the execution of Saddam Hussein. Across Western media, this was broadcast as a definitive victory over tyranny. But the superpower that placed the noose around his neck was the exact same entity that armed, funded, and engineered his rise to power in the first place. His life is a documented case study in how global superpowers operate. They build regional assets to secure their own interests, and the moment those assets stop being useful, they destroy them. To understand how Saddam became an asset, we have to look at the artificial creation of his country. Following the collapse of the Ottoman Empire after World War I, British and Western interests carved up the Middle East, drawing completely new borders and creating the state of Iraq to secure trade routes and resources. The British installed a monarchy to keep the region compliant, but the regime was wildly unstable. Its final ruler, King Faisal II, inherited the throne as a toddler. By 1958, he was assassinated by his own military, plunging the country into a chaotic cycle of military dictatorships. Out of this political vacuum emerged the Ba'ath Party, a political movement focused on Arab nationalism and unity. They capitalized on the unrest, promising strength and stability to a fractured public. The U.S. intelligence community monitored these shifts with intense interest. Iraq's president was moving toward a strategic alliance with the Soviet Union, prompting the CIA to search for a more compliant internal alternative. They identified Saddam Hussein, who was rapidly consolidating power as the head of the National Intelligence Service. By purging his political rivals with calculated brutality, Saddam demonstrated exactly the kind of ruthless efficiency the CIA required to maintain regional influence. He did not lead a grassroots revolution. He was a carefully selected tool, backed by Western intelligence, designed to secure control over an unpredictable region. This map shows the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East in 1979. For decades, Iran had been a reliable American ally under the Shah, but the 1979 Iranian Revolution flipped the country from a heavily armed U.S. asset directly into a hostile adversary. The revolution brought Ruhollah Khomeini to power. His aggressive, anti-Western rhetoric terrified the United States. They suddenly had a massive strategic hole in the Middle East and needed a proxy force to contain him. The U.S., along with wealthy neighbors like Kuwait, immediately turned to Saddam Hussein. They poured billions of dollars and heavy weaponry into Iraq, backing Saddam as he launched a massive invasion into Iran in 1980. The ensuing 8-year war was a brutal meat grinder. 2 million people died across both sides. By the end of it, the borders hadn't moved an inch, and Iraq was left sitting on a crushing $80 billion debt. The war achieved nothing for Iraq except economic ruin and total dependency on the very powers that spurred the conflict. This cross-section illustrates what happened next. Kuwait refused to forgive Iraq's war debt. Instead, they began slant drilling, a technique where a drill bit curves underground to extract oil across a national border, directly siphoning Iraqi oil reserves. Saddam viewed this as outright economic warfare. Frustrated, Saddam threatened Kuwait. The U.S. deliberately sent vague diplomatic signals, implying they had no opinion on Arab border disputes. Interpreting this as a green light from his longtime backers, Saddam invaded Kuwait in August 1990. The trap snapped shut. The U.S. immediately pivoted, using the invasion as a pretext to launch Operation Desert Storm. A massive U.S.-led coalition arrived, initiating a relentless air campaign designed to systematically decimate the Iraqi military infrastructure. But the U.S. didn't march to Baghdad to remove Saddam. They intentionally left him in power. A weakened, heavily sanctioned Saddam was still useful as a localized buffer against Iran. The Gulf War effectively stripped him of his military might. He was no longer a well-funded regional partner. He was now a contained, convenient scapegoat. In 2001, the September 11th attacks triggered a significant downturn in the American economy. To address the looming recession, the Bush administration looked toward foreign assets, specifically gold and petroleum, to stabilize the dollar. A severely weakened Iraq, already drained by decades of war and international sanctions, presented an ideal target for a resource-driven intervention. The administration of George W. Bush required a visible target to satisfy the military-industrial complex and justify a massive mobilization of power. They accused Iraq of hoarding weapons of mass destruction. Weapons of mass destruction, or WMDs, are nuclear, biological, or chemical weapons capable of causing large-scale loss of life. International inspectors scoured the country, but found no such arsenal. The narrative was a fabrication. The true objective was financial. Invading Iraq meant seizing its vast petroleum infrastructure, privatizing its resources, and ensuring that global energy markets remained strictly dominated by the US dollar. The 2003 invasion of Iraq was the final stage in the life cycle of an asset, the disposal of a tool that no longer served the empire's bottom line. The removal of that asset required the total dismantling of the Iraqi state. Millions of civilians were displaced, hundreds of thousands were killed, and the civic infrastructure was bombed into scrap metal. Under the occupation, the local population faced extreme brutalization. At facilities like the Abu Ghraib prison, U.S. personnel engaged in systemic torture, breaking the populace and deeply radicalizing a generation of survivors. The liberation of Iraq was actually a systematic destruction of a state to ensure it could never again challenge Western economic interests. Modern Middle Eastern terrorism did not happen by accident. Groups like ISIS emerged directly from the power vacuum, the ruined cities, and the tortured prisoners left behind by the U.S. invasion. This creates a cynical, highly profitable loop. Destabilizing a region secures immediate access to its resources. The resulting chaos births terrorism, and that terrorism provides endless justification to sell more weapons and secure larger military budgets. The story of Saddam Hussein is the blueprint for how superpowers treat the world, as a series of disposable assets in a multi-trillion-dollar game of resource control.